Hello out there folks, hope you're all doing well. In this video we're going to be looking at the latest build of Automobilista 2 by Reza Studios, which is version 1.5.3.5. So this is the very latest version, and we're going to be concentrating on this car, the Nissan GT-R Nismo GT3. And the reason I'm focusing on it is because if you've been following the whole Automobilista 2 updates or the news on it, you'll know that it's had massive updates to the physics, the tyres, everything. Now I'm part of the Paddock Club, so I've actually watched this update happen incrementally as they've updated the beta one by one over the course of months. Now everything's got a lot better, tyre physics have got a lot better, everything. But there's a problem with this Nissan GT-R. When it first came out, some people found that it could be a little bit squirrely coming out of corners if you throttled it on the back end. However, now it seems to have a problem with braking. So it's squirrely under braking. I'm going to try and solve that problem for you right now. And to do that, first of all, let's just have a look at the car and its specs. So what I'm going to focus on here is weight distribution. It's 54/64 to the front. So you've got 54 to the front. It's front heavy. So you would expect it to be reasonably stable under braking. It's not rear-engined or it's not mid-engined. Unlike, say, the Porsche, which is really rear-end heavy, 57 to the rear, or the McLaren, 56 to the rear. So this is 54 to the front. If you turn your ABS off and everything in this car, and you lock the brakes, it will go straight on. But if you're trail braking, there's a problem with the back end. So, and the reason for this is one thing to take into account. It is more weight at the front, but the back end's light. The back end's light, so you're going to have a slight lack of grip there at the back end. So that would explain maybe why it's a little bit squirrely under acceleration, but maybe under braking as well. And I could be wrong here. With the back end being light, that may lose traction, but there are other reasons as well, and that comes down to the default setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to my test bed, which is Laguna Seca, and we're going to concentrate on the first couple of corners. I might take it around Rainy Curve as well for a high-speed corner, just on the first go. But to show you what I mean, we're going to go straight out on the default setup. So I'll show you that now. We're just resetting to defaults. So you can see here, we're on defaults. We've got our traction control and anti-lock brakes on default. Let's just take it out for a quick drive. And you can see all my pedal inputs and braking inputs down here on the tachometer. You can see what the tyres are doing as well. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is drive down to this first corner. I'm going to hit the brakes about here and try and trail brake it around the corner, staying on the rubbered line. And look, that's under trail braking. That's with the ABS on its default setup. So we've got traction control on its default setup as well. Try this corner here. We're going to brake about here and trail brake in. Not quite so bad there. Let's try one more. Up to third gear and then trail brake in. Not so bad, but that first corner, pretty terrible under low speed braking. So that's okay, but what if you're like me and you like to drive with all of the aids, traction control and anti-lock brakes as low as possible, or maybe even off? You might want to do this if you're on a particularly warm track in perfect conditions, or you might just have them at the lowest settings without turning them completely off. But for the purpose of this example, I'm going to turn them completely off. So watch what happens now. Now the ABS, I'm not the biggest fan of the ABS in Automobilista 2, but it did save us quite well on the second two corners there. We're going to do exactly the same thing. So braking about now, and yeah, we've gone straight round again at the first corner. We'll go to the second two. Much more squirrely without the traction control, under acceleration, braking about now, turning in, and There you go, I've got our ABS off there, so it's not saved us at all around the second corner. Let's try this one. Braking, and it's gone round. So that's under braking. Of course, with the traction control turned off, if you stab the throttle in this thing, it is going to do that. So, down to second gear, stab the throttle, back end will come out. So that's the acceleration. We're mainly concentrating on the braking here. Right, why is this happening? Well, let's have a look at the setup, because as a basis for comparison, I've tried this car in Assetto Corsa Competizione by Kunos, and also in their original simulator Assetto Corsa. And the car is quite squirrely under throttle with your ABS and traction control turned off, but under braking it's much more stable in both of those sims. So I had a look at what's actually going on. Now we're going to look first of all at tyre pressures. Have a look. On the default setup, your rear tyre pressure, your front tyres, I've got them at 175 bar, or you might have them in PSI, depending on what your readouts are set to, whether they're metric or imperial. But look at the rear. Doesn't matter what they're measured in, it's 183 at the back. That is a heck of a lot higher. Okay, so you've got less rolling resistance, but also less grip with less contact patch on those rear tyres. And you might think, well, maybe that's being done to stop the rear tyres from heating up too much and wearing out. But the front tyres in this car generally get warmer than the fronts because of that front end heaviness. So I think you can get away with bringing that down. Watch what happens if we bring that down to 75. So it's equal with the front now. And also, another thing I noticed, that on the aggressive, and I'm talking about the aggressive setup in ACC at this track here, the camber on the rear is quite a bit higher than it is in Automobilista 2. So I think the default setting in ACC is 3.5 to the front, 3 to the rear. Whereas this is a whole degree lower rather than half a degree. So what we're also going to do, and you probably don't need to max this out, you can probably just maybe go up to 3.2, but just for the purpose of this video we're going to completely max that out. And one more thing we're going to do, that's all we're going to do. So we've changed the tyre pressure at the rear, and we have changed the camber at the rear. That's all we've done. We're going to keep doing this with traction control and anti-lock brakes off, but engine braking is also set to 1 to the front. So, and that affects how much the rear wheels slow down under braking from the engine. So if we put that to 5, they'll slow down less under braking torque from the engine. So that's all we've done. Now let's go out and see what happens. There we go. So down to the first corner, hitting the brakes about now, trail braking into the corner, turning in just as hard, and we're absolutely fine. In fact, it even feels better under acceleration. So braking here, turning in, just start to come around ever so slightly at the end of the corner there. Let's reverse up and get a bit of speed for this corner, see what happens. So here we go. Turning in, braking, trail braking, and we're absolutely fine. Literally, those, and please try this as well, please get back to me in the comments and just see how much those, as I said, all we did is we lowered the rear tyres pressure wise, we've maxed out the camber on the rear wheels, and in the drivetrain we've taken the engine braking up to 5, and that's made it a hell of a lot more manageable. Now I did go a little bit further than this, and I made a couple of setups. so to make it even more manageable. So let's load one of those now. So that's the first one I did, which was changing the rear camber, pressure and engine braking. And then I also adjusted the spring rate and bump stop. And I don't need to load it because I know what I did. So, and this will help you under acceleration. On the rear, and I also found this with in the setups in AC and ACC, or Assetto Corsa and Assetto Corsa Competizione, there's much more bump stop range on the rear than there is on the front, on the aggressive setup and the normal setup for that car. So if you lower that bump stop, so it's now 5 mil, it's got more range, so you've got more range of travel in your suspension at the rear. Also, take your spring rate down by 1. That's all you need to do. And now, okay, I'm going to full throttle it out of the pits here and try and hold it under acceleration. Absolutely stab it, which really should be spinning this car around with all the horsepower it's got, but let's see what happens. There we go, that's full throttle, totally controllable. We're gonna brake about here. And we are understeering a bit more, but we're certain, and I'm using more throttle coming out of that corner there, and we're nice and stable. Really lovely and stable there, absolutely lovely and stable. Braking in, turning in, hard, and absolutely fine. So what's that like under acceleration now? So let's stick it in second around this corner and pop it one. Very manageable. I did lift a couple of times. Let's try not lifting. Okay. I should have slowed down a little bit first because we've understeered, but let's slow right down. Swing it and pop it. There we go. It's gone round, but it's so much more manageable. But let's go a little bit further. And the other thing I noticed, because when I do all of this, just to get that feeling that I was getting in AC, I also noticed that the rear downforce, even on the aggressive setup in AC, is up to, you've only got an adjustment of between 0 and 4. In this, you've got 0, default is 5, max is 8. But in ACC, it's at 8. So let's try sticking that to 8. You've also got, on the aggressive setup in AC, less rear rebound. So we've got more than the front here. So let's take that down. So we're taking down, well, we'll leave the fast bump where it is. But we'll take down the rear rebounds. So it's more equal to what I'm seeing in ACC. And you might be thinking, great, but now you've got more understeer. We're going to try and cure that as well. Now let's see how we get on. And we're going to go with this new wing setup. Obviously we want to try the high-speed aerodynamics, so we'll go all the way to Rainy Curve. Full throttling it. There we go. I've just warmed those rear tyres up quite a bit, but you're going to see when I brake, we actually get the fronts warmed up quite nicely as well. Now, you're probably thinking, there we go, it's so much more manageable now, so much, and under throttle. What about a higher speed corner? Much better, full throttle out. You might be thinking, well, you could maybe sort out that braking issue by just bringing the brake bias forward. And in this car on default, the brake bias is set at 60/40. But as you can see, the brakes from temperature wise are reasonably well balanced. And the more pressure you put towards the front brakes, the more chance of lockup, and with a front engine car and more weight at the front, if you lock up, the car's just going to go straight on. I'm using nearly full throttle around rainy curve there, no problem. Trail braking in here, absolutely no problem. Completely tamed it. So, now the thing with the brakes is, as I said, you could change that to about 66 to the front on the brakes, like that. But you're going to be wearing out those front tyres more, you're going to risk more chance of lockup. So making these changes to the setup is a much better idea. But we have now got a little bit of understeer. So let's see now with these new changes if we can try and get some oversteer back or better turning, but not with quite so much problems under braking. I could increase the toe angle on the front, but I don't want to be wearing those rear tyres out, or front tyres out more, because more toe is going to wear them more. So the easiest thing that I can think of straight away is we can ramp up the rear anti-roll bar. So that's at 3 at the moment. Let's go crazy with it. Let's take it all the way up to 10, just as an example. And also, to increase turn-in under braking, let's take our preload, and I will say the preload on default setup 110 is very close to how it's set up in AC, or rather ACC on the aggressive, or on the normal setup. A little bit lower, I think it's down to 100 on the aggressive setup. Let's take that all the way down to 90. Okay, see what happens. Taking that preload down is going to make it easy to control under throttle, but what happens under braking now, especially is what we've just done to the anti-roll bar. Oh yes, it's still stable under braking, but it did seem to understeer less. Let's have a look here. Yes, it is understeering less. That's really quite good. I've not tried this, everything else you've seen me do I've tried beforehand. I've not tried changing the anti-roll bars or the diff, so you're seeing me do that literally as I go along. So that's not too bad. Let's see if we can make that, let's see how extreme we can go with that. So we'll take the diff down to 80, and we're gonna, how far will the anti-roll bar go? All the way up to 21. That's a bit scary. Let's try it at 18. And maybe, just to help the front pitch it a bit more, take that down to 12. Might upset the aero balance, but, well, we'll see. We're generally, the first 2 corners are pretty low speed, so aero's not so much of a thing, but at places like rainy curve, that will come into play more as it's more high speed. Let's see what happens. Much more turning. Oh, much better. Under braking. Didn't really get that corner right, but here we go. Braking now, turning in. Very good. Turning and say, well, I've got loads of room on the outside. Right, let's try a proper lap and see what happens to the tyres, heat balance wise. So now we've got rid of the terrible problem of the back just stepping out completely under braking, but we've induced understeer, and now we've gotten rid of it, but the car's not gone back to that horrible just step out of the rear end braking that it does. Also, as you can see, I'm using quite a lot of throttle out of the corners. I'm going to full throttle it here. Back end is not stepping out. And as you can already see, watch the, I know I'm going around a right-hand corner here, but watch that right front. The right front is at a higher temperature than the rear, and also the front left is getting up to maybe 1 degree hotter at the front. So the tyres are now nicely balanced. The rears aren't overheating, so this would be a sustainable setup, nice, stable, sustainable setup for a race. Obviously for qualifying, you might want to even go back to the default setup. It might be fast for qualifying, but very unstable for racing. But let's just have a little brake and turn in here. Gone a little bit wide, but we've kept it safe. And look at those brakes, they're quite nicely balanced. So, what you can do now, so you can see those brakes are, you know, they're about 100 degrees higher at the front than they're at the rear. As you'd expect. Let's see what happens when we do an emergency stop. Yeah, there we go, they're settling out there, just over 100 degrees hotter at the front, maybe 110, 120. So, now, obviously we've increased the drag by turning that wing up at the rear. So can we get a little bit more speed back if we now, because those rear brakes are a little bit cooler, we can get them up to efficiency quicker in terms of temperature by taking about half the rear brake ducting off. Now obviously that is going to mean that the rear brakes, you know, for a start it won't make any difference, but once you've done a lap, those rear brakes are going to get as efficient as the fronts quicker. So you may want to adjust your brake bias forward a couple of clicks to balance that out. So maybe 62 to the front. And that won't increase the chance of locking up at the front if the rears are getting up to temperature quickly. Let's see what happens. I'm deliberately not doing a full burnout at the start now, just to save the tyres. Now, don't take anything that I'm saying here for granted. Try it out for yourselves, see what you think. But for me, this setup, and I will show you the full setup at the end so you can jot all of those settings down. This is much more manageable, but let's see what happens with these brakes and tyres now. Obviously, closing up the rear ducts does have a very slight effect on tyre temperature as well, so that may increase the rear temps a bit. But as long as you're careful with it, it should be alright. Let's give it a really good hard stop here. Bring those brakes up to temperature. And we're still a lot cooler on the back end. Gonna brake round here a bit. Do a little emergency stop before this last corner here. As I said, it's with less brake blanking on the rear, it's not how fast they get up to temperature, it's that they'll cool down a lot slower, so they will remain at a higher temperature, therefore more efficient as long as you don't brake too hard. Broke so hard though, I nearly got a little bit of lock-up on the inside, or my side, rear I think it was. Okay, so we're now, let's just really stop hard there. We're still doing quite well on temperature. In fact, I think what we could do is go even lower on the braking at the back, because obviously we've changed the balance to the front as well, so that's counteracted it. So how about we do that? And also, let's see if we can get away with speeding up our... Because the car's handling so well now, I think, if I'm careful, I might be able to get away with bringing that spoiler at the rear down a couple of clicks. In fact, let's go crazy and let's put it back to 5 and see if we can now handle this car without fear of losing the back end, under braking, or acceleration, with less drag on the rear and less downforce, because mechanically wise now the car's, it's very stable just using the changes we've made to the mechanical grip. Now it's mainly the high speed corners that I'm more worried about, but I can already feel, yeah, you can feel there's less downforce on the rear. But we're not losing it in the high speed corners. And we're still trail braking, so trail braking in, this is quite high speed. Turning in, lovely. Braking very, very hard there and late for the corkscrew. Using trail braking around Rainy Curve, that's a high speed curve, and we're not in fear of having the back ends swing round on us. So let's try a flying lap, and just to show you the difference, we're going to go back to the default setup after this and try and do the same. Those rear brakes now within about 60 to 80 degrees of each other to the fronts. Tyre pressures are quite equal, although I do think with closing those ducts, we have increased the tyre temperatures to the rear by about 3 degrees. So we will have to manage those rear tyres, but and also with less downforce they're going to be slipping around a bit more on the back. But with that rear wing, down a few clicks, we've got rid of a lot of the drag and having no problem under braking or really acceleration. You can see my inputs all the time there. I'm full throttling it there, as you can see, and it's very manageable. But and we're doing quite well on tyre temps. I am a little bit worried about that, so let's just come back to the pits here and we'll give it a little bit more cooling to the rear. Just a little bit. So another 5% to the rear. Let's see. Now this is going to be a dangerous thing. I'm not expecting this to go well. Let's see if we can handle it with less rear wing. And knowing what this car's like, and if you've driven this car, you know these problems that I've been experiencing that I'm trying to solve here. But with that setup for the mechanical grip, with what we've done, let's just see if we could even manage it with no rear wing. So, for instance, that would be good for Monza, if you like, a track with more long straights and corners. Right, this is going to be a real test of this setup. I do not expect it to be stable. When we get to high speed, we might do all right around the low speed corners, but we're still using a bit of aero even around here. So I'm braking in, turning in. Oh, I had to come off the brakes there. I felt it start to want to go. Yeah. But if I adjust my driving style to suit, hang on, turning in, braking, yeah, the rear end is coming around quite a bit. So let's just add a little bit more rear wing. We'll go to 4. So we're less than we have, one less than we have on the default setup. By the way, if you are finding any of this information useful, or if you just like my videos, please do subscribe to the channel, give us a like. It all helps to support the channel and for me to make better videos for you. So, okay, right. I am now getting away with trail braking around these corners. You can see my inputs there, with less rear wing than the default setup, but the car is behaving a heck of a lot better than the default setup allows me to. And that was full throttle out of that corner, so just wait till we get to the high speed corners, because that will be the real test with less rear wing. Getting more turn in there, I'm happy with that. Like I said, you can't really tell all that well from watching my driving here, because obviously, because I'm talking, I'm not concentrating fully on my laps, so I'm not hitting every single apex perfectly every single time and doing exactly the same lap. Just try this out for yourself. But that, to me, and also with the reduction in aero drag, that is a much more manageable. I've used full throttle out of that corner, little bit of a correction, that's all I've had to use. I am very pleased with that. I hope you will be too. So braking in, it's just starting to come round. That open diff helping that happen, and also more manageable. I've used full throttle there, and it's manageable out of the corner. Can even change down to second there and really rag the back end, and it's totally manageable. Full throttle out of there, and I can control it. So, if you want that setup, here's what to do. So, in fact, I'm just going to quickly save that for myself. Just quickly. And call that final for today. So that's loaded. If you want that setup, here's what we did. So, we've lowered our rear roll bar. We've changed our anti-roll bars to these values. We changed our brake bias from 60 to the front to 62 to the front. And we've lowered the tyre pressures at the rear to equally what they are at the front. Lowered the brake ducting at the back to 20%. And under our suspension, well, you can just pause the video here and copy all of these down. I won't keep going through what we've changed because you already know that. And here, of course, is what we did with all of the ABS, engine braking, and the diff there. And you can pause the video there. Before I end this video, I'm quickly going to now save that setup. I'm going to reset to defaults. I'm going to take off the ABS and traction control. And I'm going to just go back and see what a lap is like trying to drive it on the default setup as I just did there. Oh! Okay, yeah, it's definitely a bit harder to get out of the pits, but we've now, that's unfair to the default setup because we've warmed up the tyres too much, so let's pull out safely. Definitely more squirrely on the back end. So coming down at the first corner, braking here, not going to brake too hard, turning in very lightly there, and the back end's gone immediately. So let's try and keep it under control. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just cannot do the same thing on the default setup. I'm going to have to adjust my driving. Oh, and under acceleration it's difficult as well. What about the high-speed corners? It's coming round, it's coming round. We'll do one more corner and then we'll call it quits because this has been a long enough video. We've understeered off there because I broke too hard. It's just not the same. So anyway, I hope you found that useful. Please try out the setup and tell me what you think in the comments. So you might think, no, you're completely wrong, you've balked the car. But to me, it's much more manageable and a much more pleasurable car to drive. I'm going to save those setup files and keep them somewhere safe now. As I said earlier, if you like my videos and if you find them useful and you don't just think I'm a complete idiot who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about and couldn't set up the car for love nor money, tell me that in the comments. But if you do like what I do, please subscribe, give us a like. Thanks very much. See you out on track. All the best.